Greetings. What's up, my guy? How's it going, Scott?
Good. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing pretty good. Man, we have a world of news to talk about, and nobody does it like you when you put it in maps. Before we go to the Ukrainian situation, what is going on, in your opinion, with the Palestinian Israeli crisis and how it's leading up to a direct conflict between the U.S. and Iran?
Yeah. In my personal opinion, I think that the Middle East is on the precipice of a very large regional war. There seems to be a consensus in Washington, as well as a consensus in Tel Aviv, that a war is somehow a winnable objective in the Middle East against Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu is on in a position where if he doesn't continue this war, he will have to hold elections immediately after, and he will likely go to prison. Honestly, if people don't remember, before October 7th, Israel was not in a very stable place domestically. The defense secretary was basically forming his own militia. There was like ideas about coups happening and stuff like that because Israel was getting pulled in multiple different directions. October 7th happened. It kind of solidified the Israeli state against a common enemy. And the continuation of that is southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, and then Iran, now that Gaza is sort of in a place where not as much is happening there anymore. I get disagreed with this quite frequently. A lot of people say that the U.S. doesn't want this. Washington is sort of going against this idea of a war. They put out a lot of statements saying things like, we don't want Iran to strike, we don't want Israel to strike Iran proper. We don't want them to strike their nuclear facilities, their oil facilities. We're concerned about peace, so on and so forth. But then they go and do the exact opposite in their actions in continuing to arm and fund Israel, which is their geostrategic partner in the region. So I don't blame them for doing that. But if you're looking at it from an analytical point of view, Washington and Israel, Tel Aviv are on the exact same page and they're going in the exact same direction. Um, Currently, the war aims against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon are not going according to plan. Uh, in terms of their ability to assassinate and decapitate high level ranking members of the organization, they are very capable in doing that. They have an amazing intelligence apparatus. However, when you're dealing with an organization like Hezbollah, first off, they are very top up oriented, right? They're not top down oriented. It's not like a Western military or government where if the head is cut off, the beast dies, right? With Hezbollah, you're dealing with a organization that is fundamentally designed around martyrdom. They their expectation from their fight with Israel is that they are going to die. So if you're expecting that you could die at at any point, you are going to have contingency plans. You are going to have control over like frontline units and everything is with the field commanders. So these assassinations really don't do anything other than put people into positions of power who just watched their predecessor get assassinated. It's not really who you want to be dealing with. They will not deal with you because they know what the outcome is going to be. And overall, the situation in southern Lebanon is looking very, very poor for Israel. We've seen a week of ongoing offensive operations into southern Lebanon. They have been ambushed frequently. There is IEDs everywhere. The IDF is even talking about how Hezbollah put motion sensors and small cameras into fake rocks all across the southern border so they could tell when the IDF is coming across. So the whole time we knew that the ground operation into Lebanon was not going to be a overly beneficial thing for Israel. We saw it in 1982, it failed. We saw it in 2006, it failed. We're seeing it in 2024. It's going to fail again. And Hezbollah we often talk about their missile capabilities, but their infantry and fighting capabilities are way above the IDF, especially because the IDF has the arduous task of going into southern Lebanon, which is a guerrilla warfare's wet dream, basically. If I not to be, uh, you know, dirty or anything, but it is the best possible location for the defenders. It's way different than Gaza. It is extremely beneficial for Hezbollah. So, sort of, not a lot of talk is going on about southern Lebanon right now because of these, at least perceived failures. We don't know if they're actually failing. They could be getting things done. We just don't know. There's a lot of censorship on the border. We don't know what's going on. But in terms of the escalating situation with Iran, Hezbollah is obviously a militia of the IRGC. Um, Iran seems to be Israel's focus. If Israel wanted to stop the war at any point, if Washington wanted to stop the war at any point, the only thing they would have to do is settle the situation in Gaza. Just a ceasefire at all would just completely stop this whole thing. A ceasefire is the end of the Benjamin Netanyahu regime or government, and the way to keep this going is sort of to continue pushing these wars. There are already factions in the United States, John Bolton, Lindsey Graham, who, while their states are being ravaged by hurricanes, and they should be out helping their constituents, they're instead on online talking about sending more money to Israel and stuff like that, which I personally have a problem with because I think my money should be going to American taxpayers who need it first and foremost. But besides that, these are the individuals who are in the permanent establishment in the United States, the congressmen and the senators. These are the people that get reelected frequently. They never leave office, and they are the ones that are really making the decisions. The presidents come and go. These people stay, and these people are controlled by lobbies, right? So the military-industrial complex, they benefit from a war with Iran. America does not benefit from a war with in a war with Iran. The Pentagon knows it. The more military-minded people in the United States know it. But you have a political push that overrides a military, logic sort of sense right now. I don't think this is going to end well for Israel, but I think the position that Israel is in currently does not allow it to step down. Like I said, Israel is not a overly stable place domestically. As soon as all of this ends, those problems are going to resurface. They are also not incredibly strong economically right now because of what's happening in the north, obviously what's happening in the south. They've mobilized a lot of their men that are in the military. Israel is in a very, very difficult position, and that's not how they want to appear. After the previous retaliation and the assassinations of the General Secretary of Hezbollah, Israel did seem like they were in charge. Iran was very quiet. Apparently, there were some backdoor dealings between Washington and Iran, where if Iran didn't respond for the assassination of the Hamas negotiator in Tehran, I know this is a lot of information all at once, but if they didn't respond to that strike, there would potentially be a sanctions relief package for Iran and a negotiated ceasefire in Gaza, which, if your listeners don't know, the whole reason Iran and Hezbollah are even involved with Israel at all right now is with the aims of achieving a ceasefire in Gaza in support of the Palestinian cause. Obviously, there are geostrategic interests for Iran, but that is the openly stated goal. And so all of this could potentially end if that were to happen. That didn't happen. Then the General Secretary of Hezbollah was assassinated. Iran then chose to respond, and that was on October 1st. That response was a heavy kinetic response with ballistic missiles that penetrated two of Israel's most important air bases, as well as struck the Mossad headquarters. We have not got satellite images for the Mossad headquarters or Tel Nor Air Base in Tel Aviv, which were hit. We did get some satellite photos from the Navatim Air Base, which showed some hits, accurate hits by Iranian ballistic missiles. So Iran has proved their capabilities in the region. They have proved that they can very quickly and without notice strike any target inside of Israel, including the intelligence agencies, any civilian infrastructure, whatever they need to target. They've made that point very clear. Immediately after this attack, you saw all of the Arab states basically pledge their neutrality on this conflict because of that demonstration. That demonstration showed very clearly that Iran is capable of striking every oil facility in the Middle East, which would be absolutely devastating for the Arab world as well as the global economy. So they're just prefacing this by saying, hey, we're not going to let Israel or the United States use our air bases for any air campaigns on your territory. So Iran has reestablished deterrence, at least temporarily. This is very important for the Iranian regime in their position. As far as we know, they're not a nuclear state yet, so there is nothing preventing a war from escalating. There is no mutually assured destruction. Israel does have nukes. Iran doesn't, as far as we know. And what I think is going to happen very soon is you are going to see an Israeli response, because they have to reassert themselves and regain deterrence with Iran and in the region. Remember, like I said, Israel is kind of weak. Their whole bravado in the region is the fact that they can hit anybody at any time. And if you hit us, it's going to be a problem. We control the escalation ladder. We control what's going on in the region. Iran just removed that from Israel. Israel feels very weak. Benjamin Netanyahu feels very compromised. And I think we are going to see a highly escalatory response from Israel against, most likely, in my opinion, Iranian oil infrastructure, which will probably send the region into a regional war. And then, we are on the escalation ladder and there is no stepping off. Iran will respond to Israel. Israel will respond in kind. And we will likely see the end of the Iranian state. And I don't know if we'll see the end of the Israeli state because it is backed by the United States, but or at least the regimes. But I think you will see serious damage to the Israeli state through ballistic missile strikes and stuff like that. So I really do think we are on the precipice of a larger war. And I think there are a lot of people in Washington who desperately want this war before the election happens.
I have a take similar to yours. I think the U.S. and Israel play good cop, bad cop, and I think both of them are in it all the way together. And I think it can go back. You can trace it back to the assassination of Soleimani. You can go back to the assassination of Rafik Hariri. All of that stuff that led us up to this moment. Because if you think about it, why would America transfer 100+ bunker busting bombs to Israel? Why would America have airstrikes on areas in Syria the night before, which is left out, the night before it, the assassination of Nasrallah? The United States assassinated Iranian colonel and his staff in Syria through airstrikes. All of this stuff is working together, and that's why I believe that Iran now is making it clear that if Israel strikes us now, we will not only see that as an Israeli strike, but we know that the United States is enabling it with weapons, with intelligence, and with everything. Now, here's where we diverge. I believe when the regional war happens, we won't see the end of the state of Iran. We may see the end of the state of Israel, and this is why I believe in such. Because first of all, the EU, the UK, the US, and Israel all are dealing with financial problems, the likes of which we've never seen before. They can ill afford a major war, and if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, you have the the Houthis already shutting down a water lane where anyone that is selling goods to Israel is blocked or is sunken. So I believe that this war will escalate in such a way where there may be an embargo on the participants in this theater of war, which could collapse the dollar, and which means that it will collapse the economy of Israel, because the only way Israel exists now is through injections of liquidity from the US, the UK, and the EU.
So I fully agree with you. Your logic is sound and your reasoning is fantastic. The one point I would love to argue in your whole take there is that you are coming at this from a logical standpoint. You are dealing with illogical people. First off, you are dealing with people that not 2 years ago thought that they were going to be able to cause regime change in Russia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
These are the people that you're dealing with. They thought that sanctions were going to destroy the Russian economy. They still do. They still talk about it like sanctions are going to work somehow. They don't seem to understand that this entire ploy has failed. So you're talking about failure in Ukraine. That was delusional. They were delusional for 2.5 years. There are still some people who are delusional, but most people are starting to understand what's happening in Ukraine. Those same people And some of them that didn't really experience Ukraine because their primary focus is on Israel and the Middle East, those people think that they can win this war like that. That's the delusion. Is you're dealing with people who think that the Strait of Hormuz will not be closed down, that the global oil market will not be set on fire. You're talking about people that, and honestly, you're talking about an Israel that will more than likely use tactical nuclear weapons if pushed to that point, right? And I don't think the U.S. actually has any problem with it. I've had some theories for a while now that the U.S. is looking for somebody, some proxy, some enemy to escalate to that point where a tactical nuclear weapon is used, because once it is used, the battlefield changes entirely. And part of U.S. and Israeli doctrine is the use of tactical nuclear weapons. I mean, you can see it from Ukraine. We don't have the manufacturing. We don't have the infrastructure even. Like, we don't have the factories. It's not even like we can open up the factories and start producing if we train up people. We have to train people, build the factories. We're talking 5 years to a decade before we're ready for an actual war of any scale. No, nuclear weapons are a means and a matter of our military doctrine. And I do really believe that if Iran responds to Israel's initial strike or initial retaliation in the next wave, that the Israeli retaliation will include nuclear weapons. Small yield tactical nuclear weapons to destroy hardened facilities inside of Iran.
Speaking of that, it brought to mind what the vice president of Iran said, or the foreign minister of Iran said when he was being interviewed. And before I quote what he said, I want to go and play a short clip of John Kerry, because there's something in this. I played this clip yesterday, but it's something that is pertaining to what you and I are talking about right now. I want to replay this, just a portion of the clip, so that you can hear something that John Kerry said that's very important. It goes along with what the official from Iran stated when he was told that maybe if you're defeating Israel, they may strike with nuclear weapons or whatever. So I want to play John Kerry real quick.
Speaking to journalists in New York, Secretary of State John Kerry insisted no better deal could have been reached with Iran, saying Tehran had already been, quote, chasing a nuclear weapon as recently as 2003.
When people say, oh my gosh, I'm worried about what happens in year 15 or 20, they may become a nuclear threshold nation. Folks, they are a nuclear threshold nation today. They became that. And they
Hello?
do forever.
Speaking to journalists in New York, Secretary of State John Kerry insisted no better deal could have been reached.
Iran was already a nuclear threshold nation. And it brought to mind what the official said when the journalists said that maybe Israel would escalate with the use of nuclear weapons. And he was very calm in his response. He says, whatever escalation they use, we will do the exact same thing.
Yep.
And in so many words, he was saying that if they use nukes, then all bets are off. Then we will acquire and we will use them. So the nuclear threat no longer holds sway over Iran, because they have the capability to constitute a nuclear weapon really quick. And some reports saying, viable reports saying that they have enough fissile material acquired for in between 5 and 10 nuclear weapons. So I think the nuclear, because if you use a nuclear weapon on Iran, Iran is a little bit bigger than the state of Alaska. That is 2.5 times the size of Texas, to give you an idea of how big Iran is.
Yeah.
Israel is smaller than the state of New Jersey. Yep. So who would survive a nuclear confrontation? This is what I'm saying. So that, to me, that goes off the table when you can respond and say, listen, if this takes place, we will respond in kind. Yeah. We will survive a nuclear exchange, but will you? And I think when we look at this whole situation, I believe that what you were saying at first, when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu trying to stay in office because he and his family may go to prison because they're corrupt as hell. That is true. But I believe that is the doctrine. I truly believe that is the preponderant thought of most people in Israel. Because if you look at the polls, they are in agreement with what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. So how do we get ourselves out of this situation when you have someone who has this mind of religion, religious dogma, saying that we're going to bring in our savior or something like this by escalating to nuclear threshold, and then you have one nation that is constantly being attacked and has been restrained, and saying now the restraint is off. No more. You will not get any free licks off. We're no longer the Tootsie Roll factory. You no longer get free licks. You hit us, we hit you back.
Yeah. And I again, you're not wrong. It's just I don't think Israel can possibly stay in a position where they do not control the escalation ladder. They have to be in the position that Iran is in right now. That position that you're just talking about, where where there is a mutually assured destruction, there is some sort of deterrence. If Israel has that, Israel is a fundamentally weaker state in the region than Iran, than Saudi Arabia, than Syria even, than Iraq, than all of these different states. Because Israel does not, like you said, it's the size of New Jersey. It is supposed to be this, when you think of Israel, it is this titanic player in the Middle East, but it is so tiny, and its population is so small. Its military is not that strong. It is just backed up by the United States. That's why I always say it's the 51st state of the United States of America. It literally is a means for us to control the region, and this crazy ideological religious doctrine sort of thing that you're talking about, it plays into the idea that Israel, if you believe that Israel is like a chosen state by God, then you are not going to lose, correct? I mean, both sides think that they're chosen by God to win, so that's, I don't know whose God chooses which there, but whatever. And I feel that Israel has to respond. I do believe they are going to respond tonight. I think they're going to make a big deal out of October 8th, because I think that's when the attack is going to happen. So October 7th was the memorial, the morning, whatever. October 8th is going to be the reclamation day sort of deal for Israel in the Middle East. It's not going to last long because, Iran is past the point. They've already stepped over that line. They've already set the boundary in the sand. If they do not hold up, then Israel will win in the Middle East, and that's the end of the Iranian regime. And when I say the end of Iran, I don't mean that the Iranian state is just going to disappear. I mean that so much damage and instability comes to the region that the current government or regime is ousted for some reason. Same thing that you're probably going to see in Ukraine, and that's not Iran's fault. It would just be a coalition of the United States, probably some NATO countries, including Britain and France, targeting certain areas of Iran, and Iran might try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz and all of that. But I don't see how Israel sits idly by after having lost its deterrence in every sense of the word. The other thing with that John Kerry snippet that you put up, it's very interesting. If you go back and listen to some of Bibi's speeches back in the late 90s, early 2000s, he was basically talking about the global war on terror before the global war on terror was happening. He was up there talking about how these Arab states need to be taken out, including like the Palestinian state, the Lebanon, Iran is obviously the head. So this has been a long-term project for Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the Greater Israel Project, and this is directly in line with the global war on terror. You're looking at Iran has been 2 weeks away from a nuke since 2003, right? That's a boogeyman, right? That's a boogeyman. Even if they do have the fissionable material, right? They've been that close for 21 years, and they never decided to just go ahead and cross that threshold. Maybe they thought the state would be destroyed if they crossed that. I don't know. But if you look at what states do have nukes, China, Russia, North Korea, right? India, Pakistan, These are the countries that don't really get messed with all that much because they have a nuclear deterrent. And it's not like you want everybody just to have nukes, because mistakes happen and complications can occur. But there are some specific states that are on that threshold that are openly being targeted by the current hegemon. And I have a feeling that those states will try to achieve that nuclear capability within the next 5 years for sure. Absolutely.
And I believe that maybe if this was 10 years ago, that Israel could defeat Iran with
Oh,
the backing of the
I don't
United
think,
States.
yeah, I don't think Israel can defeat Iran by any sense. If you want my take on it, like I said, I think the Israeli economy, I think the Israeli state is going to be just annihilated. But the thing about the Israeli state is it has
Yes.
the partner in the U.S. who will come back in and potentially rebuild everything. It also has a partner in the U.S. that may very well get involved with Israel against Iran. And I don't know how the Iranian state holds up with that unless they get support from Russia, China, a partner. And then that's a much wider war, and that's a crazy thing. So I think I think the smarter people in Washington are making very public statements. The Pentagon is talking about how we need to avoid a war because they know they're not going to win it. That even if they destroy Iran, they're reinvesting in the Middle East. We just spent 24 years pulling out of the goddamn place. I mean, going in and then pulling out, right? We just got out of Afghanistan. It was a nightmare. Even the pullout was a complete disaster. We're leaving Iraq by 2026. We've been kicked out of multiple African states, including Niger, where we had one of our largest African military bases for AFCOM. Where we are losing across the board. And reinvesting in a war in the Middle East will be the end of the U.S. empire. This is our Suez moment right here. I don't know if you know what the Suez moment is for the British,
Yes.
but yeah, this is our Suez moment. If we go back into the Middle East, it basically means we are more committed to the military industrial complex and big oil, and just in terms of like maintaining our hegemon in the Middle East for our money reasons, than we are focused on our near peer competitor in China and our current proxy war with Russia. It means we basically have already said that we're giving up on the proxy war in Ukraine. And I mean, China, like I said, the best thing for China in the world right now would be for the U.S. to go into the Middle East. Can you imagine the U.S. being distracted, spending money in the Middle East for another 2 or 3 years while China continues to develop and is just ignored? It's and honestly, in my opinion, the reason why we are going after Iran now is because we went after the second strongest, in the alliance, the Chinese, Russian, Iranian alliance. We went after what we perceived to be the second strongest. We thought that if we could pull Putin out of his office, if we could pull Russia away from China, basically re 1991, oligarchize the entire place and steal all their wealth and keep them down like we did after the fall of the Soviet Union, then China wouldn't have an energy partner from the north, right? And that was the goal. We sanctioned them. It failed. We've realized that it's failed. Now we're going after the next weakest link, right? The weakest link of the alliance being Iran, right? Because North Korea has nukes. You can't go into North Korea. They're highly militarized. It would be a nightmare for South Korea. It's a nightmare all around. You can't deal with them. You can't deal with China because they're already basically passing you in their region, right? The regional power is overcoming the U.S.'s global power, and Iran is the only available target. And it's just like 2003 again. We have this military and we don't know what to do with it.
And that's what I was getting to. If it was 10, 20 years ago, with the backing of the United States, Israel may be able to prevail. But when we look at the state of the military with the United States, they have to decommission ships because they don't have enough sailors. They have to change the guidelines for people to do basic training because people are obese. They have half of the ships don't work. Half of the things that were touted are non-existent in the weapon system. Then you see Israel being hammered on by Hezbollah, and then you see the economic situation there. If and I do believe it's going to take place, there will be a regional war and America will get involved. And this will break the global power of the American empire. I believe
Yeah.
that she will limp out of the Middle East. Both she and the UK will limp out of the Middle East, never to be fully respected as a power in that area again, because she would take some. Iran will be devastated, but the
Yeah.
losses of the empire and
That's
her weakened state will help China to rise even more. Okay.
that's sort of my exact thinking is Iran might just be about to take the bullet for the the multipolar world, if you will. Like Iran might have to just take the hit now. Everybody maybe thought that Russia was going to take the hit, but Iran might just take it, and then like you said, China, Russia, and the global South are going to benefit tremendously from a uh, preoccupied and then demoralized Western world.
You said something earlier, and I want to go back to it before we transition to the 800-pound gorilla, which is the Ukrainian crisis. And by the way, I got to tell everybody, this guy kicks butt when it comes to mapping. I'm telling you, and giving you real time situations, real time intelligence. But when it comes to the Israeli Iranian conflict, there were reports, and I heard it behind closed doors, that not only is Hezbollah on the defensive, they also have taken the initiative and they have entered into, if you want to call it occupied Palestine or if you want to call it Israel, they have troops fighting on that side of the border also now, and that is why Israel is now bombing indiscriminately across Lebanon. It's because they're losing so bad on the ground that they're trying to cover up the mass loss. And also, I wonder why they have not employed their Panzer systems. Do you know why? Because they have acquired Panzer systems, but they never have deployed them yet. I'm talking about
The
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, yeah. So basically, the goal for Hezbollah right now is survive. That's because you don't have means to interdict F-35s or F-16s, right? This is the major issue, is that you don't have air defense. You don't. I mean, man pads are they if you're flying at altitude, they don't benefit you. The overall situation is you're hiding. You have your most important weapon systems, your long range ballistic missiles, are in, mountain complexes, basically, like giant concrete silos where you just have rows of vehicles that can launch missiles. That all that stuff is safe, and it would have to be targeted by a tactical nuclear weapon if you wanted to get rid of it. Um, the the if you want to bring out all of your advanced systems, your Panzers, your stuff like that, all of this stuff will be targeted almost immediately. I mean, we've seen how aggressively um, Israel is bombing in Lebanon. They don't care. They don't care where you put it. They're going to bomb it. They don't care if it's on top, underneath a school. They don't care. That's like a slight difference between the Russians and the Israelis, right? Is that like the entire Ukraine war? Ukraine has not necessarily been using human shields, but the Russian willingness to go through civilians to, achieve a military strike is much, much, much lower than Israel's willingness to. So, just being around civilians helped Ukrainians avoid Russian strikes. Hezbollah will put, missile systems inside of or underneath apartment complexes, and that's not to say that they're not like using human shields. It's just if you're going to you know this war's coming. Hezbollah knows this war's coming. It's very obvious. They know the enemy that they're dealing with. You can't just have this stuff in warehouses that it'll all just get bombed immediately. And you've seen it, right? You've seen just suburbs in Beirut just leveled, and with these bunker busting bombs and stuff like that, killing hundreds of civilians in the process. But the goal is to survive. Like I said, Hezbollah's military, like infantry section of their military, is incredibly strong. They fought against ISIS. They They were trained by, Russian units in conjunction. They have incredible special forces as well. And I really don't think this should be understated. Like, the IDF is not really a professional military. It's mostly, they've all been trained. They're all reservists. So, like, it's professional, but they haven't been training their whole lives for this. These Hezbollah guys have been training their entire lives to do this exact same thing since 2006. All these guys were little kids watching their dads get killed in the 2006 war, and now they grew up and they've been training their entire lives for this. So yes, we have seen some at least reports of incursions. Again, there's so much censorship, we don't really know what's going on. But yeah, Israel is going to have an incredibly difficult time going into southern Lebanon, and I don't know why they even went in. I would have just continued doing a strategic bombing campaign because entering into Lebanon puts yourself on a clock. Israel is now on a clock. This is the exact same thing that happened in 2006. All Hezbollah has to do is just bleed them and let them come in. Or not even. I mean, if they can't, then don't let them come in. But all they have to do is just survive, just a couple months, and then the IDF are going to be exhausted.
Now I want to play another short clip for you, and I want your take on what Donald is a difference in the candidates. But you have Kamala saying that we will stand with Israel and defend Israel, and we'll give Israel whatever they need to defend themselves. And I want you to hear what Donald Trump had to say about the situation, because this was even more escalatory than the laughing hyena. Okay,
yeah. I listened to Biden yesterday. Since I went under the wing, I used to go under the wing of the aircraft. Nobody ever did that before. I did. All of a sudden, Biden started, but he only takes like a half a question. Usually can't answer it. But they asked him, "What do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran?" And he goes, "As long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff." That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong. Isn't that what you're supposed to hit? I mean, it's the biggest risk we have. Nuclear weapons, the power of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt the entire military, jets, everything. I built it, including nuclear, and I hated to build the nuclear, but I got to know firsthand the power of that stuff, and I'll tell you what, we have to be totally prepared. We have to be absolutely prepared. But when they asked him that question, the answer should have been, hit the nuclear first and worry about the rest later. And that's what they should. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. But we'll find out whatever their plans are. But great question. Thank you very much.
So what do you have to say about that?
So first and foremost, all of that to me is just political theater, both of them. I don't really listen to what they're saying in election years, because what Kamala's position should be for her party is not pro-Israel, right? That should not be what she's saying at all. That's not the line of the Democratic Party. She's actually losing quite a bit of her base through the whole Gaza thing. I mean, the Democrats have notoriously been pro-Palestine. So she's really hurting with her base in this instance. So you can really see how the election is making decisions here for some of these politicians, and particularly AIPAC, right? AIPAC is a very large lobby. You don't want to lose a large lobby in the middle of your election cycle, like in the middle of your campaign. So when Trump says, I actually believe both of them, and he's not technically wrong. I mean, if you do hit Iran, you should probably hit their nuclear program, because if you don't, they're likely very close, if not already have a nuclear device. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to cross that line anyway, you might as well just do it. He's not wrong. Now, it is a completely ludicrous thing to say because of what the consequences of said actions will be, but I don't really think he is a military-minded individual. I think that he is a businessman. Same goes for Kamala. I don't think that they are really military or geostrategically minded individuals. I think that they are much better on the domestic level. I don't think Kamala is very good anywhere, but yeah, no, this is, and I'm not surprised that both parties are agreeing on this, because this has never ever been a it's never been a single party issue. This has always been bipartisan. Israel is a geostrategic partner of the United States, and people don't like to admit this, but we use them as a forward operating base. They are an excuse for us to do whatever we want in the Middle East, and they carry out our geopolitical interests in the region. They are fully in line with what we want all the time, almost, without fail. So no, I don't think that it's a ridiculous thing for him to say. I think it's what everybody in Washington is saying, and that's why I think everybody should be greatly concerned about the situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, I guess everybody glossed over what you said about Kamala. I thought it was hilarious. You don't think she's good in any area, but anyway,
Dude,
I heard that.
she's somehow worse than Biden when her teleprompter goes off. It's crazy, dude. I don't understand how there wasn't a single person, even another black lady. Like get another person of color up there that you can, tout around like that. Why did you pick the one of the least capable human beings on the planet? She was not capable when she was a DA. She was not capable when she was a governor or a congresswoman. She was not capable when she was the vice president, and she's going to be a horrible president. They don't even want her to be president, just like Biden wasn't president. It's almost offensive how stupid they think that their audience is. Maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah, and I talk about that all the time on my show, and how these people in power cannot respect the average person's intelligence with the stuff that they put out and the policies that they initiate. They're like, whatever. They won't understand it. They won't do anything about it, so we can put it out there. And I think that's one of the causes of the fall of America also. But I want to play this clip right here from President Vladimir Putin on the situation that is going on in Ukraine.
Today, in the difficult situation in the world, we see that this is exceptionally important. We see that the United States is trying to preserve its global hegemony, including military hegemony. They're using Ukraine to try and strategically defeat Russia, saying that they are trying to oppose the Russian threat and contain China. They use this as a pretense to expand their military presence on our borders in Asia, in the Asia-Pacific. The US and its allies are openly saying that they are going to station their weapons systems, their missiles, weapons systems in areas close to us, including the Asia-Pacific, including in Europe, etc. They are already testing out the expansion of their military systems in the region. They're trying to destroy and unbalance the balance of powers in the Asia-Pacific. They're provoking an arms race. They're forming the precursors for a dangerous situation in Asia and in the Asia-Pacific. Let me emphasize, Russia has to be prepared for any type of situation, and our armed forces maintain a strong defense of Russian sovereignty and its interests. We'll be prepared to counteract a threat in any area, including on land and on sea, and our Navy plays an important role in that. Our sailors, our seamen have always stood bravely at the defense of their fatherland. And today, during the special military operation, they fight bravely on the front lines. They strike the enemy and defeat the enemy, destroy its military facilities and infrastructure effectively. They perform with valor and professionalism. They're true heroes.
So, Scott, he's talking about the West, the U.S. and the West are provoking an arms race. But my thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the West has already lost the arms race to Russia.
Yeah, so I mean, what he's specifically talking about there is that the West is positioning themselves to do exactly what we did in the 1960s, right? We put short range tactical nuclear weapons into Turkey. In response to that, the Russians then put tactical nuclear weapons, or I'm sorry, nuclear weapons on missiles in Cuba. And that was the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? That was resolved when the nuclear weapons were removed from Turkey and the Russians sort of backed down and removed their missiles from Cuba. This is the Russian-Cuban Missile Crisis all over again. This is why they invaded Ukraine in 2014 during the the Western Baku. This is why they invaded again in 2022. They are trying to prevent the sort of geographical isolation of their country being surrounded by an expanding NATO. Economically, it will starve them, and just geostrategically, they lose all influence around themselves, which will hurt them economically. It'll hurt them in every sort of way. So this is what he's talking about, and the West is doing this in Taiwan as well, creating a strategic issue in the region for China, and just sort of pressing the boundaries everywhere. When it comes to the arms race, the arms race is sort of, in my opinion, over. We have the Russians have potentially more advanced arms in terms of their hypersonic capabilities and stuff like this. The Russians are much further ahead than the Americans are in this realm. But the thing about deterrence, strategic deterrence, is that the United States still has their submarine triad, their nuclear triad, and their bomber part of their triad, right? So the three that make up the triad, they still have all of those. So even if you don't have hypersonic missiles, if anybody comes at you, you still have a deterrence method to prevent the attack in the first place, or if they do attack you, mutually assured destruction. So the arms race sort of deal kind of died in the 1970s, 1980s, when the United States and Russia both had mutually assured destruction with intercontinental ballistic missiles, and they both have use it or lose it doctrine, meaning that there is really not a first strike capability for either one side in the situation. What's more worrisome to me is the fact that the U.S. is continuously pushing the boundaries of where will Russia respond? How will they respond? If they give us an inch, we're going to take a mile. That's the really risky part. And it becomes very risky when you're talking about the collapse of the Eurozone. So I'm not so worried about nuclear weapons when it comes to Ukraine, and I'm not so worried about like the arms race or anything like that. I think that Russia is like you said, technically winning the arms race, but that is more of a tactical nature, right? The Kinzhals being used will have first strike capabilities. They will be able to hit targets before they're able to get off the ground. That will give Russia a means to first and foremost deter, but also gives them a first strike capability. What that means for the United States is if they get a warning, they have to use their weapons immediately, right? So that's the part of the arms race that's concerning, is that the response time, the reaction time, the ability to calm down and understand what's going on and make a proper educated response is removed. And that's where Russia is winning, and that's very worrisome for the United States. But my biggest concern is this proxy war staying conventional and just deteriorating the fabric of Europe's society in general. That will do incredible economic damage to the world. It will do incredible economic damage to the United States, and the entire Eurozone will probably fall into chaos.
Well, where are we when it comes to the Ukrainian crisis? Because, man, you do a lot of maps, updates every day. Tell us where everything stands as of today.
Do you want me to share some of my map?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. I'll throw it up here. Can you see that?
Yeah, I'll put it up right now.
There you go. We're looking at a couple of very, very difficult situations for the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians, since we've last talked, had lost Ugledar, which is the linchpin of the southern front line. This is a nightmare for the Ukrainians. In fact, the Ukrainians stayed in this locality, were surrounded, cut off, and destroyed. The 72nd Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces was completely destroyed. Was removed earlier. They have been deemed combat incapable now after months and months of fighting. The 123rd Territorial Defense Brigade, so just basically like National Guard, were left in here and suffered tremendous casualties. The commander of that brigade committed suicide and had a funeral a couple days ago in western Ukraine. The situation here is developing very fast. You can see that the Russians are continuing to advance in some of these areas. And this is the area of the front that you guys should watch the most cautiously, because this is where we're about to see the most Russian movement. Not a lot of Ukrainian defenses in this area, and not a very strong Ukrainian army to defend it. And then another area which is of extreme concern for the AFU is this pocket just south of Seledove. This pocket right here, you can see, is only supplied through this road that comes out of Kharkove right here through Stary Terny and then down along the reservoir up into these areas which Ukraine currently holds. The red area is Russian controlled. The green area is confirmed Russian advances. So these are new Russian advances. This will become red eventually. And you can see how the Russians are getting very close to this line of logistics. The Ukrainians are now sitting in a pocket about 8 miles deep. If you are not an Ameribro, that would be like something around 13 kilometers in depth. That's a massive salient. That is a horrible situation for the Ukrainians, and this pocket is about to collapse, again, compromising Ukrainian defense in the region. We are getting to the point in the Ukraine conflict right now, I'll stop sharing now, where the lines have left the strong fortified positions that we saw in the early 2020s, 2022, but they were built, in the 2016, 2017, 2018 years after the conflict froze. These were some of the strongest fortifications in the world. You can think of the Maginot Line in France. You can think of the DMZ in North Korea. That was what this was. I mean, bunkers, trenches, tunnels, everything you can think of. The entire area was just built for this defense. The Russians are now through that. There's no more urban, territories to defend. There's no more cities in the south. The Russians are getting into the empty, open, flat fields of Ukraine, the open steppe, which, in the 1940s was what the Germans utilized to quickly push the Russians back through Ukraine. It has forever been a geostrategic weakness for the Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation. Capturing it and pushing the front line out to the Dnieper River will give the Russians an incredible amount of strategic security in the region. So we are getting close to sort of the big arrow offensives. The Ukrainian military collapsing. It is getting worse and worse. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see some heavy push for a negotiated settlement here very soon. If that does happen, expect a big, 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 big win for Russia. Sanctions relief, NATO neutrality for Ukraine, and probably at least the 4 oblasts being evacuated, likely more though.
But didn't Vladimir Putin say that they won't accept anything less than denazification and the removal of all U.S. and Western military facilities in Ukraine?
Yes, that is true, and that goes along with the NATO neutrality. So with NATO neutrality, there is no military cooperation between any of the European states, a part of NATO, or the United States. So that encompasses that. The denazification aspect of it, I don't know if that is ever going to fully occur. The reason why is if the Western Ukraine is likely never going to be Russia, and Western Ukraine is where a majority of the Nazism sort of thrives. That's where Stefan Bandera is celebrated. That's that area, and Russia likely will never have control over that area. If worst case scenario for Ukraine, the Russians push through, take just about everything. You will have a mass exodus of those individuals into Europe. that's going to be, Europe's going to have a denazification problem at that point. So, I don't really know if that's so much of a priority at this point, especially because a lot of the far right groups, Azov, ADAR, C14, some of the right sector units, they've been battered. They've been beaten up. And really what's happened with Zelensky is Zelensky was not a part of that group. He was not a part of the Ukrainian nationalist camp. That was more Zaluzhny, the former commander of the Ukrainian armed forces. He was very, very close with the right sector. Probably a good big reason why he was removed was because Zelensky was starting to fear an internal power struggle between, his government and the right, the far right in Ukraine, the Nazi groups. But they have really weakened. They've experienced some tremendous losses in leadership, and their demographic base in Ukraine all volunteered to go fight the Russians. So they were the first ones out there, and a lot of those guys aren't around anymore. So overall, I think that the whole Nazi sort of like the denazification thing is slightly lowered on priority just because it's not as big of an issue at this point. It's still
Do
there.
you think do you think if there is a negotiated settlement and they come to terms with the denazification and the removal of all CIA and intelligence bases and military bases, do you believe that Russia will require that their military guard the borders of Ukraine? Because that is the only way to prevent that from happening again, is to have Russian troops guarding the border to its west.
So I think what you're going to see is you are never going to see a negotiated settlement, at least with the current regime. So I always say the only way this conflict ends is with regime change in Moscow, Putin getting removed, or regime change in Ukraine with Zelensky getting removed. And I don't see Putin getting removed anytime soon. So the only way this goes through, and because we've seen it, right? Zelensky's about to go to Ramstein on October 12th and beg for more weapons and more ammunition and present his peace plan, which is basically give us everything we need so we can put the hurt on the Russians and then they'll come to the negotiating table. Hasn't worked for 2.5 years. It's not going to work after this. It is not a plan, but it shows the lack of willingness to even consider any sort of negotiated settlement. Again, I think that would be either the death of Zelensky or the permanent exile of Zelensky. So if he was to go through with that, he wouldn't survive it anyway. His best shot is just to keep this war going as long as possible, take as much money as he can, and then when he has to leave, he gets out. And really, that's the absolute worst scenario for Ukraine as a state. And it is the worst scenario for the West, in my personal opinion, because what's going to happen is Russia is going to win huge. Instead of Russia just winning minorly, right? Say in 2022, during March, during the Istanbul negotiations, Russia backed out of all of the areas they took, except the Donbass got its autonomy. They voted, they got annexed. That little part of the country becomes Russia. But NATO neutrality is secured. The Ukrainian state is still whole, still demographically viable. They really weren't very viable before the war, but now it's a complete, absolute train wreck. So they could have gotten away with that. That would have been a win considering. The West didn't think that that was the right way to go about it. They've extended this now. And now what you're looking at is a massive just collapse is about to happen. Like there's no way that you're going to be able to keep fighting when you don't have ammunition, you don't have manpower, you don't have morale, and you're not willing to negotiate. So you're forcing them to stay in those positions. Eventually that's going to buckle. We're already seeing it. The Russians are advancing way faster than they ever have before. And when that happens, why will the Russians stop? The thing that's preventing the Russians from conquering all of Ukraine right this moment is the fact that there's a Ukrainian army standing in the way, right? When that Ukrainian army is gone, the Russians are going to push all the way through. And the longer you don't make a negotiated settlement, the more pain you inflict on Russia, the higher the toll, the more they're going to take. the more stupid incursions you do into Kursk and these areas, the further you get pushed back away from their borders. And really, what I think is going to happen, and it sucks, is that we're going to see another year and a half of this war. Potentially, we're going to see this awful slow retreat by the Ukrainians, sort of a German 1940-esque, 1945-esque deal back into Berlin, and it's going to end with the Kiev regime getting ousted, Zelensky going into exile or being killed, and then the entire Ukrainian state not having an economy, not having Western support because they lost their guy, and then the Russians are just going to push through. And that is the absolute worst thing for the Ukrainian state, I guess you would say. But it might be the best thing for the Ukrainian state at the end of the day if they don't have to worry about these issues in the future.
Now, I only have another, maybe one or two questions to ask you because I know you have a lot to do. I can't see how Russia can fight this war and not take Odessa as the bridge work to Transnistria. Because if they don't take that, then they will always be bothered by that bridgehead to Transnistria. So to me, common sense tells me that Odessa is a Russian city, a Russian area anyway. Logic tells you to take that. Now you control all of the waterway on the Black Sea area right there. And you have a bridgehead into Transnistria to resupply your troops, your peacekeepers that are in Transnistria. To stop without doing that is to put those troops that are in Transnistria in harm's way. And also, I believe that Russia should take more of Ukraine, not just to take it and gobble it up, but any part of Ukraine that they leave in the hands of the West can reconstitute some part of it as a bridgehead or bulwark against Russia, the stationing of missiles, observation posts, radars, or whatever. So Russia has to do this whole thing, or else it's going to come back for 5, 10, 20 years.
I mean, you're exactly
right.
What
do you say about that?
I think you're exactly right. And I think that this is a very real possibility. I've always said that Odessa will not be taken by military force. The military might be there, but they're just going to walk in. By that time, the war is being fought in the east. It will be entirely fought in the east. And once the east is done, the Ukrainian army will be expended, right? Because there's no point in defending anywhere west of Kramatorsk, right? In the Donbass, that is where you want to hold the line. There's nowhere else like that in Ukraine where you can defend like anywhere even remotely close. So their best option is where they're at. That's the reason why they're getting in these encirclements and staying in these areas too long, is because if they retreat, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And so once they get back to Kramatorsk, which I think will be, 6 months to a year from now, probably at the current rate of advance, if it speeds up, we could see things happen a lot quicker, but I'm not exactly sure on that. Eventually the Ukrainian army is going to collapse. Eventually their wages are not going to be getting paid. Eventually the ammunition is going to dry up. There will not be resistance in the same way. And that's when I think the Russians will start making plays for places like Nikolaev and Odessa. And for that exact reason, right? You have an openly vulnerable pocket in Transnistria that you need to take care of. It is an ongoing issue, and if you leave it in the I honestly at this point think the common thinking in Moscow is if we leave a Ukraine, we are going to be dealing with this in 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah. I also have that thought myself. Scott, man, thank you again. I mean, you do an excellent job, and you showed us just a little snippet of your maps and stuff. Everybody, you got to go over to Calibrated and check him out. He kicks butt. This man puts a lot of understanding to the maps, because I was dumb as a brick when it comes to map reading, and he puts it all in a way where you can understand it and relate to it.
Yeah, I got a live stream at 4 or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today.
All right, I'll be over there, Scott. Man, thank you so much, man.
Take care,
hey,
brother.
Be blessed, be safe, and I'll send you the link.
All right, see you on the next one.
All right. Everybody, listen, hit the like button. It doesn't cost you anything to hit the like button. All right. All right. Share also. Like, share, and listen. Subscribe. What does it hurt? Hey, I'm the only show that after having major guests, my count goes down. Look at my count on the show. YouTube. YouTube is absolutely outrageous with suppressing this channel. But hey, it's all good because other people have been wiped away from YouTube. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth on God's green earth. I want to say this. Do good by others, not because other people are watching, but because it's the right thing to do. Because even when no one's watching you, Almighty God is watching you. That's what my mom taught me. That's what my pops taught me. That's what my grannies taught me. That's what my grandfathers taught me. So I'm passing those words of wisdom over to you. And know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out of here. Peace.